Hey everybody, John LeTourneau here, Director of Commercial Operations at eXp Commercial. I am so very, very excited to welcome an old friend and an excellent companion, Tim Rios, to eXp Commercial as our CDMB or Managing Broker for California. Again, Tim and I have known each other a long time across a lot of cities, and we've had a lot of fun in the world of real estate brokers, but we're thrilled and honored to have you join us, Tim. So thank you and welcome.
Well, thank you, John. And just a point of clarification, when you say old friend, is it because I'm old or because we've been friends for a long time?
I'll just let that sit there for a while. How
Right.
about that? Okay. Well, you threw the softball. I'm just gonna let it whiff on by.
Right.
But we've been down a few roads together, and it's really exciting, Tim, because I know you've worked with the best in the industry for a long, long time. Most recently, with Mike Lipsy, and we've used Lipsy in the past for some incredibly good education, and I know Mike as well, and been blessed to work with you there. So what made you take that switch and kind of go, hey, I see the brokerage marketplace, eXp Commercial is the place to be. Tell me about that, please.
Yeah, well, John, I want to give a little bit of background to my answer because this June will be 31 years for me in commercial real estate. It's been a wonderful industry. I can't imagine doing anything else. And during that time, my own personal brokerage, I've been affiliated with 3 different platforms in that time, one for a very long time and 2 others for relatively brief. But more than that, in my work with Mike, I have had the opportunity to circumnavigate the globe, North, South America, Europe, Asia, Australia. The only continent I haven't trained or worked with brokers is Africa. But outside of that, I've had the privilege, and that's not a boast. It's a privilege that I've had to see the world in terms of commercial real estate and brokerage platforms. And the reason I bring that up is because I am choosing eXp with knowledge, probably as complete a knowledge as any one person could ever hope to have, of everything that's available out there platform wise. And so, I think that's material, is that I'm choosing this knowing what the options are.
Absolutely. No, that's awesome. And it's intriguing because, you and I both came from a place where, you knew you succeeded when they gave you a cedar hanger to hang your coat up in the closet to gather and all that.
And we still both have our hangers, John.
Both have our hangers, yep. And it's fascinating because that was very much a brick and mortar physical, the big commercial house and all that. And we're 100% virtual. We really don't. We have mailboxes rather than offices. So it's a very different concept. And, I see the landscape shifting in residential and commercial brokerage for sure to sort of disintermediation of the brick and mortar. What are your thoughts on that compared to, do we need the big monolithic office versus virtual? What do you think there?
Well, I will say this, and this probably sounds like a very diplomatic answer. I do think that there is a role in the commercial industry for some of those brick and mortar brands. The larger shift, however, is to what we're doing here. And that is recognition of the evolution of people's lives, the evolution of the workplace, and lessons that we've learned about how work gets done, some of which were not our choice. We had to learn to live with certain facts of history. And, I think that what eXp is bringing to the table is a recognition of, and I say this from a platform because I think there's also a way that we look at it as brokers, but from a platform standpoint, eXp has looked at what's really adding value to what these brokers are doing every day. There's a lot of things that a company can say adds value to justify the overhead or whatever it is. But I think you find a lot of brokers going, I get that I'm paying for that, but I'm also not sure what I get from that. So stripping it down to those essentials to build a business, but then also giving you the ability to be an adult and decide where you work, how you work, the hours you work, all those different types of things. That's the modern workplace, I think, for most people. So while there is definitely a place for some of the platforms out there, and I think there always will be, this is what most people are migrating towards.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned kind of sort of like the long-term knock-on effects of the pandemic came through, and all of a sudden everyone's like, oh, wow, I don't have to be hub and spoke anymore. Now I can be hub and roam and just go. And, and we have that ability working virtually, because one of the other interesting things was, it's not work from home. You live at your job. So it better be somewhere cool, and you might as well enjoy it while you're doing it, right? Like flip this on its head a little bit. And of course, the effects of that are still also being felt property segment by property segment too. And that's an intriguing sort of turn for the conversation, is kind of going, okay, well, look at the office segment since then and what's happened and continues to happen. We're seeing, redevelopment, knockdowns. And the joke I make is, for a lot of these properties, the next occupant's going to be a bulldozer of office because
sure,
no one coming back, not in that way, right? So what are you seeing in the office segment? Let's talk about some property stuff.
Yeah, sure. Well, it's interesting when we tend to have a real recency bias when we think about the world around us. And essentially what that means is our most recent experiences kind of inform our worldview and how we see it. And so there's this idea of, oh man, office has been knocked on its rear end. Well, number one, over the last 5-6 years, yes, it has. But remember, in our lifetimes, John, I think you and I have been in this business long enough you and I could play the way back game and think of all of the brands, the concepts, the death of the big interior mega mall. I mean, how many brands and formats have we seen come and go over the years?
Yeah, true.
So this is just the latest evolution. And what we've seen in office is this tremendous flight to quality. This is a great time to own Class A office space in most markets. And the reason I say that there's been such a flight to quality is because this hybrid work environment, now we're looking at it and say, okay, I have 40 full-time employees, but we're looking at our office space more like a hotel. What's our occupancy? So if I have 40 full-time employees, but my typical attendance is 20 full-time employees, well, now I don't necessarily have to reduce my real estate spend. What I'm doing is I'm spending it on making it a better place. And so it really has created two classes in office, really. There's the quality that people are still spending money on. And then there's the, call it B's and C's, or whatever you want to call it. And yeah, it's a struggle there. And there's going to be, as you said, reformatting, maybe even redevelopment. And, we'll see. But this is not, people shouldn't take it to be some like unprecedented thing. Lots of things have come and gone in the time you and I have been in the business.
Absolutely. And it's interesting too. You look at markets like Raleigh and the Triangle areas of Texas, there is no Class A office. Their vacancy rate is super low single digits because there is so much pressure back. But instead of taking a 20,000 foot floor plate, a law firm might take 10,000, but make it really bougie.
Right.
We're seeing super high TI, super high improvement, super high customization space.
Yep.
That's been a consistent theme too. So yeah, it's total alignment there. All right. So pivoting on to industrial, my favorite, and I do love me some industrial. That's been one that is intriguing because we saw so much space absorption, new construction, so much forward vision of that through the pandemic onward. They were adding 40, 50 million square feet in metro markets like Chicago, for example, added almost 60 million in a year. I think there's a lot of space overhang there. And there's an interesting juxtaposition between physical occupancy and actual physical need of space. And we're seeing some weird contractions happen. Onshoring and the tariffs have resulted in a lot more production coming back. So even those smaller units, which may have been lower ceiling, not exactly big box distribution, are being used in a different way now than maybe even 5-10 years ago.
Right.
Curious, what are you seeing in industrial? Anything similar, different? What's your take on the industrial market right now?
Well, I do agree with you. In the short term, there is an overhang. There is, real estate is an interesting commodity, if you will, because there's almost always an overreaction to market conditions. So you go back to the pandemic and everybody's ordering things on Amazon and e-commerce explodes and last mile distribution becomes the belle of the ball, all of this. And what do we do? Well, we do what we always do in real estate. We built more than we needed. So
imagine that.
And it's tough because the development pipeline, as you know, it takes a while when you go through, finding the space and the entitlement process and the design review and then actually building it. At some point, you are so far down the road that it's like, let's just finish it.
You got to go. Right. Yeah.
And so the overhang is, at least in my opinion, it's not because people are dumb or they can't read the terrain. They know there's just a point at which you got to keep going. Mm-hmm. Now, that being said, I do think that in the long term, we're just going to need more of it. Yeah. I think there's a little bit of short-term pain, which I would say take an office landlord and put them under this industrial owner that's having pain right now. And the office owner is going to say, you don't know what pain is, my friend.
Exactly.
But that, that aside, I think when you look at the evolution, even getting back to when you asked me the first question about eXp's model, industrial now is not only critical to the way we live and where we live, because we're sort of decentralizing in a lot of ways. It has also become so critically important to the retail sector. The way that brick and mortar has learned to compete is people still love to see and touch and feel, but you need to be able to have it at your fingertips. And if you can't physically have it in your store, you need to have it in a warehouse close by for quick fulfillment. And so industrial now plays, rather than just this long-term cross-dock, we keep a bunch of stuff, and it has become the way retailers are also competing. So the long-term prognosis for industrial, I think, is fantastic. But like you said, maybe a little more space than we need right now.
Yeah. Well, it's not 08, 09 where everything's going to become either a church or a bouncy house place. And I remember that. There's endless indoor gyms popped up everywhere. And then all of a sudden they're like, guess what? They don't build a lot of in industrial parking. And then all of a sudden there's parking nightmares in these industrial areas where they're trying to get trucks through. I think the zoning folks learned a little bit from that to where they're making more adjustments for that, but I don't think you're going to see that kind of overhanging space turn into that sort of semi-apocalyptic bouncy house church environment.
We only need so many Halloween stores,
Yeah, exactly. My favorite, of course, is when the government shuts down and 2 hours later, Spirit Halloween's in the White House. Like, here we are, new store. There's best meeting ever there. But, cool. And you talked about industrial actually adding agility and sort of flexibility to retail. And retail to me is just absolutely on fire and has been for a while. Not necessarily, mega malls, of course, which are their own thing, but small and mid-sized retail, man, that's a great place to be right now. If you're an owner, if you're a landlord, thrilling times. If you're a tenant rep, maybe a little tough to get out there and actually land something because it's so competitive is what we're seeing. And how do you see the market there on small and mid-sized retail?
I'll say this much about retail. Whenever I think about retail for too long, I feel like I need to lay down and take a nap. It is, of all the product types, it is the most rapidly evolving because it is so driven by fashion and trends. And, you look at, in my career, I remember a time when sit-down restaurants, as an example, were great, and then we shifted where Americans weren't eating out less. They were just spending less money. And so now all of a sudden it's the QSRs and it's a different format where that's one of the challenges with retail is just that. It's the fickle consumer. It's the way that you and I vote when we pull our wallet out of our pocket, which we all know is actually the strongest vote you cast, is what you do when you pull your wallet out of your pocket or your purse. And so retail makes me it makes me a little bit sleepy. But what do I think about the prognosis of it? I'll say this much: people love brick and mortar retail. Agreed. I don't care. You've seen all the jokes about people buying something on, say, Temu, and it shows up and it's like, this doesn't look at all like the picture. There's been a bit of a backlash against the e-commerce in the sense that I would like to see what it is. I don't mind ordering it and having it show up to my door, but I want to know that what I'm getting is what I think I'm getting. Yeah. And so for that reason, retail has woven itself into certainly American culture. That I'm sure as well as anybody that we have more retail space per capita than any country on earth.
Oh, by far. Yeah, absolutely.
But it's who we are. It's who we are. So yeah, you're right. It's a good product type. It's just not for the faint of heart, because you need to understand the consumer so very well, I think, to be as successful as you possibly can in retail, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, you bring up a good point, which is that experience of touching feelings, but like, okay, is it big enough? Will it fit in the room? Is it the right color? Like whatever all those things are, to avoid that sort of challenge of like, oh man. And when you brought up, not getting exactly what you think you got, and I'm going to date us with this reference as far as that goes, sort of like Stonehenge from Spinal Tap. It's about that high. Like, I want a Stonehenge. Well, you got one, but
right,
3 feet high. So yeah, it was Stonehenge, but not exactly, right?
Right.
And retail is very interesting that way. I think, small and mid-size, and again, really small local neighborhood strip center type stuff like Hair, Nails, Pizza, State Farm, Salt Caves. I mean, those are all things that can't come on an Amazon truck. So you talk about a killer place to be, especially delivering experiential retail. To me, that is just the hottest segment, but also, again, the most fickle. Because escape rooms, remember when escape rooms were everywhere? Yeah, how are they all doing now? Right?
I'll tell you this about escape rooms. I have enough things in my regular life I'm trying to escape from. I don't need to use it as a form of entertainment. So,
oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, yes, I totally agree. Absolutely. Well, let's shift over to multifamily. And multifamilies, I'm curious to get your take before I put my prognosis out there, because I've had a little bit of a unique take on the market there for a while. But I'm curious, we go to multifamily. I know that's a huge segment in property class, type, and location. But what's your multifamily sentiment look like?
Well, in all of these discussions of product types, I'm sometimes I'm sometimes accused of being a little too optimistic. Part of that is because I have been doing this for a long time, and I understand short-term pain. I understand market shifts. I've been through a number of market cycles at this point. And one thing that I have now seen with my own two eyes is that it all kind of works itself out. And now the challenge, and this is the thing that I think when we bring our expertise, whether it's on the tenant side, the landlord side, the investment side, you can buy an asset in a class, industrial, whatever, that's going gangbusters, and you can still have a disaster on your hands.
No deal so good you can't lose money on it.
Right. So it is about execution at that micro level that is the difference between success or failure. And that is also true of, are there B and C office plays out there right now for somebody to make that are going to be wonderful investments for them? And the answer to me unequivocally is yes, but it's still about that local expertise and that local execution to make that work. With multifamily, I think it's tough because we talk about rental being such a necessary part of the housing stock because we had this conversation offline before about properties in the Western US and how the prices have escalated so significantly. But we're not building any multifamily that is particularly inexpensive. And so when you get into the cost of the dirt, the cost of entitlements, where they can be in some extreme cases, they could be in 6 figures per unit before they turn a shovel for dirt.
Absolutely.
And so the only way multifamily is really the only need it's filling is, to a large extent, the person who's a renter by choice. The person who could buy a house but doesn't want to. They don't want the upkeep. They don't want the headache. They don't want to feel like they're tied down for a long time. We have an up and coming generation that has not necessarily seen what home ownership has done for generations past. And it isn't because it won't necessarily do it for them too. It's just, again, it comes back to the recency bias. And their recent memory is of some pain in some of those points. Multifamily and density could go a long way towards solving the affordable housing crisis, but not exactly as it stands right now. And so, I think multifamily, it's always been a great asset class, especially here in the United States, but I mean also in Canada when you get your capital cost allowance. But from a depreciation standpoint, it's still one of the best tax shelters out there. It's wonderful as an investment class. But I would say, if you've got something in the B or C, buy it because they're not building it anymore.
Exactly.
Yeah. In the A's, I'd tread really lightly because I think there's a lot of competition out there.
Absolutely, and it's interesting. One of our large top 20 teams and developers in California, for example, he looked at a site and he could do either kind of industrial or a multifamily, and the municipality was amenable to zoning either way. The industrial cost out of the box, and this would have only been like maybe a 50,000 or 80,000 foot building, was almost $300 a foot, all in, entitlements, everything. And you're in a $20 a foot market. Well, it'll take you 20 years to make anything. And it's like, I'll buy it from the foreclosure once the first developer goes under and it's done. Like then I get it for $100 a foot and I can make money.
Right.
You look at multifamily was $506 a square foot to develop that. And I mean, you just can't, how do you ever catch up to that? Yeah, rents are commensurate in California, but at that kind of dollar level, who puts all that risk out waiting 3 years, 4 years for any kind of return after waiting 2 and 3 and 4 years to build it?
Right.
So you have to have very patient money for that Class A stuff. But B's and C's, absolutely. I had contended multifamily's been overheated for several years. Everything's based on pro forma, which we both know is ancient Latin for the broker made it up, as I call it. Now there's some realistic plays of like, yeah, operational inefficiencies, turn it up. But it's kind of an interesting market there. And then, with what's going on currently, global affairs, one might say, that's caused some jitters in fuel pricing, of course, which is a very hot topic right now. But also interest rates bumped a point and a half, 150 basis points in about 4 seconds, based on negative speculation around what's going on. So what do you see in the capital markets? I mean, I know there's debt refi coming. There's still some of that cheap debt ready to get reset. What do you see in the capital markets coming forward?
It's such an interesting world that we live in that, and mind you, I'm an amateur when it comes to economy. I want to tip my hat to the people who spend all their time really understanding the intricacies. But the other day I had somebody ask me the question of, I don't understand why fuel prices go up so quickly on news, because they didn't pay that for the gas. Mm-hmm. Right? I mean, why do I watch the news and then I walk out and the pump price has gone up by 50 cents? And what I've tried to get across to people is the interconnectedness of markets. Even if we were energy independent, which we're honestly not that far off of,
no.
It just because we're providing our own fossil fuels, we're still part of a global market. So there's no silos anymore on planet Earth. And so in that sense, we have to deal with the geopolitical things that 100 years ago you didn't even know about until after the fact, if you ever even found out about them. Now they cause immediate shifts in the markets. And I still chuckle a little bit when people are saying, well, let's see what the Fed does next month when they meet. Well, the market's already priced in what they think the Fed's
going to do. Exactly. They're ahead of it. I mean, when they talk, and back to affordable housing for a second, everyone talked about, what's the solution? How do we fix it? And I remember hearing one of these absolutely misguided people. They've got a TV show and they talk on stocks and all these kinds of crazy things. And of course, he set up a doomsday scenario around residential property that would lead you to buy the product he was selling, a hard asset of some kind. But he said, if you really want to solve that problem, all you should do is lower interest rates by 2%. He's like, everything will be super affordable then. Well, here's the deal. If it costs $5,000 a month to live in this neighborhood and mortgages drop 2 points, what do you think is going to happen? Sellers are going to raise their prices to make it still $5,000 to live in this neighborhood. Like it's the penalty you're going to pay. So all you're going to see is increased buyer activity and increased, net seller pricing at that point. So you would actually drive prices up and make them less affordable, I think.
It's just never that simple. And I know that's somewhat self-serving of me to use this analogy, but I often talk about this in self-representation in brokerage. When you walk into something that is self-represented by the owner or the occupant or whatever it is, be it residential or commercial, they're not stupid. So if I mean, just use a simple residential example. If I'm walking down a street and I see one that's listed by eXp and I see one that's listed FSBO, every buyer is going to expect to drive a harder bargain on the one that's up unrepresented, and not even necessarily because of negotiation ability, but because, well, I know what's not going to be on your settlement statement.
Right.
People all the time. A fee is always paid, whether it's paid in discount, whether it's paid in hard lessons learned, money left on the table, or whether it's paid in cash to somebody who executed beautifully. So don't try to avoid paying a fee. Try to get something for Absolutely. Paying the fee. And, you know, so you're right. Markets aren't stupid. And so nobody has that insider information that, you know, I know this, so I'm going to drive a better deal, or I'm going to get cheaper gas, or it doesn't work that way.
No. So I got my Costco card and I get as cheap a gas as I can, and life moves on. Right. And it's interesting. You talked about, you know, that value of representation. That's one of the earliest things you and I actually talked about. I think back in 2005 or 2006, you know, you like
that. Yeah.
The classic Linwood Thompson stuff, which is really fabulous, right? Let's go back to that three-legged stool and all that. And it's spot on, which is, you know, is this the right assignment? Is this the right platform to deal with it? And am I the right agent for it? Right. And off you go. And that's the key value driver, I think, when you look at markets that are changing quickly, or our clients are waiting to be led in terms of the brokerage perspective. You know, what lessons or what messages would you give to the brokers who are struggling for a relationship, for example, right now? Because I mean, I remember 2008 and I was like, do you want to buy or sell? Well, that message didn't work so good back then.
Yeah.
Right. Then what? So you got brokers struggling to stay in contact, get in contact, and bring value. What do you tell them?
You know, one thing that I've always held as a philosophy, at least for many years anyway, more than 2 decades, and something that I teach regularly to people who I work with, you know, as a coach or mentor or whatever, is as brokers, we need to focus on the give, not the ask. And the idea when I pick up the phone and make a phone call is, without respect to whether you are transacting or have a vacancy or anything, will talking to me potentially leave a benefit for you? So am I calling with market information? Am I calling with information about a lease, which, unless you're involved in it, you don't really know what happened, or a sale, or new availabilities, or current events, or, you know, actions, new technologies, things that might help that person? So I use this analogy. I say, think about a plumber. How many of you, you know, have unless it's your neighbor or just your buddy, whatever plumber you've used, how many of you are also like going out on Friday night to have a beer, or coming over for a barbecue, or your kids play soccer together? You know, nobody wants to talk to their plumber until they spring a leak or the water heater breaks down. And when something like that happens, you want somebody that, you know, you can trust, that will be available, that has the expertise, that's not going to overcharge you, that's going to be honest in their dealings with you. But how are you going to know that person if you don't already know and have a relationship with them? Mm-hmm. Now, if a plumber came to my door right now and said, hey, Tim, I just wanted to offer up this report on, you know, the top 10 plumbing improvements that are helping people sell their houses faster, I'm going to talk to that plumber. So I always encourage brokers, you call looking for a listing, looking for an opportunity, looking for representation. That has to be a secondary purpose. Your purpose is to provide value. And over time, you know, and, you know, John, you and I have a good relationship. There's some people that come up on your caller ID where you're like, oh, do I have time to take? Yeah. I'm sad when you call up my caller ID and I can't take the phone call. And you know, that's a bit of a sappy example, but it does illustrate that when most people see a broker come up on their caller ID, it's like, oh,
that guy again.
Right? I want him to go, oh, John's calling, Tim's calling. You know, so are you laying the groundwork for them to feel that way, or are you just another knucklehead calling them, asking if they want to buy or they want to sell?
Yeah, absolutely. And coming from a family of plumbers in Chicago, I can tell you, being proactive is key and being top of mind, right? Or as we say in Chicago, I got a guy.
I got a guy.
Yeah. Woman, child, business, doesn't matter what it is, but I got a guy.
Yeah.
Right? And that proactivity is the key, and calling without motivated self-interest.
Right.
Well, it's not what's in it for me. It's what's in it for them, and how do I bring value to them in that conversation? You know?
Yep, I agree.
Cool. So as we're kind of wrapping up our time, you know, you're going to be a managing broker in California. what is your vision, or what are your goals? Like, what do you want to see happen with your leadership here in California?
Well, the big thing is, as you know, I've lived a couple of different places in my life. I'm Californian at heart, born and raised there, love the market. But because I've traveled and because I've lived some other places, I can tell you that, people always say, oh, California, California. I was out the other day and I saw somebody with a shirt, and I won't mention their state, but it said, don't California my, and then it had their name of their state.
Mm-hmm.
And so, sometimes California takes it on the chin. Oh, it's expensive. It's this, that, and the other. Well, guess what? Things are expensive for a reason. California is not just a cool place. As you know, and as many people understand, if California were its own country, it would be the 4th or 5th largest economy on the planet. It bats above its weight in terms of it's a certain percentage of the population of the United States. I think it's like 12%, but it bats 2 or 3 percentage points higher on its contribution to GDP to the country. So California is a behemoth. It is the center of entertainment on the planet. It is the center of technological innovation. It's no dog when it comes to financial services, the opportunities for recreation. California is an amazing place. Now, no place is without its flaws. But what I want to see out of the team is that we create, or continue to build upon, I shouldn't say we're certainly not creating it from the ground up, but we continue to build upon the eXp team's successes in California, and really just, I think I shared with you, and I don't even know what's realistic, but can we 2x it? Can we 3x it? Because we are swimming in the 4th or 5th largest economic pond on the planet. And so I think it's a combination of two things. Number one is taking advantage of this truly unique and fantastic market that we live in, but also getting the word out there about how eXp Commercial can be a good fit for existing practitioners who might be feeling frustrations where they are, who might be looking for problems to solve. And I'll say this about that. It's like when I get together with a prospective brokerage client, the commitment I make to them, sometimes I do it explicitly, sometimes I just try to do it with my actions, is, let me figure out what you need. And if I'm not the right guy, I'm going to be the first person to raise my hand and say, I'm not your guy. Yeah. Let me see if I can help you find your guy. And so I would say the same thing from joining the team. I would say, let's have a conversation. And if this fixes some things or helps you take it to the next level, great. If it doesn't, you and I are going to shake hands and part friends. And John, I think you and I are a living example of that in our longstanding relationship.
Absolutely.
At different companies and different iterations and things like that, you and I have remained friends the whole time. Exactly. And, now it's wonderful that we get to, as we've used the Blues Brothers reference, and get the band back together.
Yep.
That's fantastic. But it doesn't, it doesn't have to be, we're friends or we're not friends. So in terms of growing the team, I also want to have relationships out there that, while I would love it if you want to be part of a high performing team, if what you're doing still works for you, we're good. We're good. And we'll let that evolve organically. But there is so much cool upside and things that we can do in this market. To quote Tony Bennett, the best is yet to come. So, so there we go.
A fitting wrap on it. So that's awesome. That's awesome. All right. Well, Tim, thank you for your time. We're very excited again to have you and to see your leadership flourish here in California and elsewhere too, because we might be seeing you in a few other states as we travel and regional rally and eXpCon in October. So if you have questions or you want to reach out to Tim, please reach him on Hub or Slack, Smoke Signal, Pony Express, whatever you want to do, or reach out to the operations team as well. And we're happy to connect you as well.
Fantastic. John, thanks for the time. I appreciate the opportunity.
Appreciate it.